Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into one of the absolute fundamentals of programming, Python variables. Seriously, this is one of the first and most important building blocks you'll ever learn.
So let's kick things off with a simple question. Have you ever wondered how a game keeps track of your score, or how an app remembers your username after you log in? How does it handle all this information that's constantly changing? Well, the secret to all of this is something called a variable. And honestly, it's a surprisingly simple idea, but it is incredibly powerful. You can think of it as the basic memory for just about any program you'll ever use or write. So what is it really? At its heart, a variable is just a name, a label that you, the programmer, give to a piece of information. The best analogy is just a sticky note you slap on a box. You don't have to remember exactly what's inside, you just have to remember the label. And in Python, this is just beautifully simple. You use a single equal sign, we call that the assignment operator, to give a value to a variable name. So here, we're basically telling the program, hey, from now on, whenever I say X, I mean the number 5. And whenever I mention name, I'm talking about the text Samantha. Easy, right? Now, as tempting as it might be, you can't just name a variable anything you want. Python has a few simple rules you have to follow. And they're not there to be annoying, I promise. They're there to keep your code from breaking and, just as importantly, to make it easy for you and other people to read.
Okay, so this is a great way to see some of the common traps. For example, you can use underscores, but you can't use hyphens. And that's because Python already uses the hyphen for subtraction. You can't start a name with a number because, well, the computer would get confused about whether you're writing a variable or just a plain old number. And you definitely can't use spaces or any special words that are already part of the Python language itself.
So, when it all boils down to it, you just need to remember these 4 things. Stick to letters, numbers, and underscores. Always start with a letter or an underscore. Remember that capitalization matters. A lowercase age is a totally different variable from an uppercase age. And finally, just avoid using words that Python reserves for itself, like if or for. All right, so once you get the hang of naming things, Python opens up the door to some seriously cool and efficient shortcuts for assigning values to your variables. Now this is one of Python's superstar features. It means you don't have to tell Python ahead of time what kind of data a variable is going to hold. Is it a number? Is it text? Python just figures it out on its own. Now, this is fantastic for getting stuff done quickly, but it can be a bit of a double-edged sword. You have to be careful, because sometimes a variable might end up holding a type of data you didn't expect, and that can lead to some tricky bugs later on. Just watch this. We can start by assigning a whole number, 10, to a variable we call x. And if we ask Python, hey, what type of thing is this? It correctly tells us it's an integer, or int for short. And then check this out. On the very next line, we can assign a piece of text to that exact same variable. Python doesn't complain, it doesn't throw an error, it just updates the type on the fly. That right there is what we mean by dynamic, and it's what makes the language so incredibly flexible. Here's another neat trick. Let's say you need to set up a few variables with the same starting value, like setting a bunch of player scores to 0. You don't need 3 separate lines of code for that. You can do it all in one go. It's clean, it's efficient, it's just good code. And it gets even cooler. This also works for assigning different values to different variables all at once. Python is smart enough to just match them up in order. We call this technique unpacking, and it's fantastic for keeping your code super compact and easy to read. Okay, so now let's peek under the hood a little bit. That label on a box idea is a great way to start, but it's not quite the whole story of what's really happening in your computer's memory. If you take away one big idea from this explainer, make it this one. Python variables are not containers that hold data. Instead, they're more like signposts that point to where the data lives in memory. So when you type x equals 5, 2 things happen in the blink of an eye. First, Python creates an object in memory to represent the data, in this case, the number 5. Then it creates the name x and makes that name point directly to that object. So what happens when you write y equals x? You might think that y makes a copy of the number 5, but it doesn't. Y doesn't even point to x. Instead, Python just puts up a second signpost, y, and points it at the exact same 5 object that x is already pointing to. And here it is, the big aha moment. If we then change x so it points to something completely new, like the text geeks, all we've done is move the x signpost to a new object. The y signpost?
it's completely unaffected. It's still pointing right where it was at that original number 5.
Okay, now that we understand this core idea of variables as pointers, let's see how it unlocks a really elegant and practical trick that you'll actually use. Check this out. In a lot of other programming languages, if you want to swap the values of two variables, you have to create a third temporary variable just to hold on to one of the values. It's kind of clunky. But in Python, because of how it handles these pointers, you can swap them in one single, beautiful, and totally intuitive line of code.
So, let's do a quick recap of the superpowers we've just unlocked. First, variables are just simple labels for your data. Second, they have easy-to-follow naming rules. Third, their dynamic nature gives you incredible flexibility. And the big one, they are pointers to data, not boxes. And understanding that is what enables awesome, clean code like that one-line swap. Getting a handle on variables is really the first giant leap into programming. So the next logical step is to start thinking bigger. If a variable is like a sticky note for one single item, what kind of tool would you need to handle a whole shopping list or an entire